68 years on this earth, and I had never once felt invisible. Not when my husband Arthur died at 56 and left me alone with a leaking roof, a daughter who needed braces, and a grief so heavy I had to set it down in pieces just to get through the morning. Not when the city council voted to close my library branch because they said nobody used it anymore, which was a lie, but a convenient one. Not when Nicole stopped calling me on Sundays and started sending texts instead. 2 words. 3 if I was lucky. 4 on my birthday. Not once. Not in 68 years. Until my own daughter stood at her wedding reception in Nashville, held a microphone in her manicured hand, looked directly at me, and told 300 people that nobody wanted to dance with her boring old mom. And the room laughed. Every single one of them. Welcome back to Stories That Hit Where It Matters. Grab your tea, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to see what was right in front of them. They just chose not to look. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You are going to want to stay for this one. The wedding was Nicole's production. Naturally. Nicole Marie Calloway, soon to be Nicole Marie Prescott, my daughter, my only child, my greatest accomplishment, and my most puzzling heartbreak, had planned every detail of her wedding to Tyler Prescott, the way she planned everything else in her life, with precision, ambition, and absolutely no room for anything that did not match the aesthetic. The venue was a historic mansion outside Nashville, the kind of place with columns that have been standing since before the Civil War, and floors that creak in a way the brochure calls charming. 300 guests, black tie, a string quartet that probably cost more than my car, which admittedly is not a high bar because my car is a 2009 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door that I have stopped apologizing for. She called me 6 weeks before the wedding, not to ask how I was, not to tell me she missed me, to inform me that my dress needed to be, and I am quoting directly here, not too much, Mom. I did not ask what too much meant for a 68-year-old retired librarian from Memphis, whose idea of formal wear was the dress she wore to Arthur's funeral, altered twice, and dry cleaned 3 times because it was the nicest thing I owned and I saw no reason to pretend otherwise. I took the bus from Memphis to Nashville on a Saturday morning. 3 hours and 40 minutes. I brought a book, a turkey sandwich I made at 5 in the morning before Butterscotch, my orange tabby, was awake to judge me for leaving, and the quiet understanding that I was traveling to my only daughter's wedding the way you travel to a place where you are expected but not entirely wanted. I arrived at the mansion at 4:15. The place was breathtaking. I will give Nicole that. White flowers everywhere, candles that smelled like something French, and 300 of Nashville's most polished citizens beginning to arrive in cars that cost more than my house. I found my seat. Table 22. I counted. It was the farthest table from the head table, where Nicole and Tyler sat like royalty surveying their kingdom. I introduced myself to the people around me. A retired teacher from Murfreesboro, a cousin of Tyler's who kept apologizing for not knowing anyone. A woman named Doris who told me within 90 seconds that she had just had her hip replaced and was not supposed to be drinking champagne but was going to anyway. I liked Doris immediately. Nicole found me during cocktail hour. She was stunning. I will never deny that. My daughter has always been beautiful in the particular way that makes people pay attention without quite understanding why. She crossed the room toward me, and for one breath I thought she might hug me. She shook my hand. She shook my hand the way you shake the hand of someone from your office whose name you are not entirely sure of. "Mom, you look nice," she said. "Glad you could make it." And then someone more important materialized behind my shoulder, a woman with very white teeth and a very firm handshake, and Nicole was gone mid-sentence, pulled away like a tide that never intended to stay. I raised this woman, I thought. I packed her lunches every morning for 12 years. I drove her to school in a car that barely started in winter. I sat beside Arthur's hospital bed for 9 months while she was in law school, because someone had to be there, and I did not want her to choose between her father and her future. So I chose for her, quietly, the way I have always done everything. I had a glass of wine, then another. Ate the bread, because at 68 years old, I have earned the right to eat bread at my own daughter's wedding without apology. Listen to Tyler's father give a toast about success and legacy that used the word synergy twice, which I thought was unusual for a wedding but consistent with a man who apparently runs a hedge fund. Then Nicole took the microphone. She looked incredible up there. I will not pretend otherwise. Tall, sharp in her white gown, the kind of easy confidence that fills a room without asking permission. She got that from me, actually. I was like that once, in my library, in my domain, in the place where I knew every shelf and every story, and every child who walked through those doors needing something they could not name. But Nicole had stopped believing that about me a long time ago. My mom, Nicole said, smiling at the crowd with the particular warmth she reserved for audiences. She paused for effect. Where do I even start? She is a retired librarian from Memphis, Tennessee. Her biggest adventure last year was when the library got new computers, and she called me to tell me about it like it was the moon landing. The room laughed. Warm laughter. The kind that thinks it is harmless. Nicole was just getting started. Nobody wants to dance with my old mom, she said, leaning into the microphone with the timing of someone who has practiced this. She would probably try to shush the DJ. 300 people lost it. Real laughter. The kind that fills a room and bounces off those antebellum walls and settles into your chest like something you will carry home with you whether you want to or not. I stood there at table 22 and I smiled. Because 68 years had taught me that sometimes smiling is the only dignified option available to you. I smiled the way you smile when something costs you more than you are willing to show. I smiled while something very old and very quiet inside me made a sound I had not heard before. Not breaking. Something past breaking. Something that had already broken a long time ago and was only now admitting it. And then, from a table near the door, a table I had noticed earlier because the woman sitting there had the particular stillness of someone who had absolutely nothing to prove. Something shifted. She set her champagne glass down. Slowly. Precisely. The way a person sets something down when they have just decided they are finished watching and ready to act. And she looked directly at me with an expression that had nothing to do with laughter. She stood the way certain people stand when they have spent a lifetime making rooms rearrange themselves around them. Not fast, not dramatic, just inevitable. The way weather moves in, the way a door opens when someone behind it has already decided what is going to happen next. She was mid-40s, maybe a year or two past that, with the kind of quiet elegance that does not come from money alone. Money can buy the dress. Money can buy the posture coach, and the dermatologist, and the personal stylist. But it cannot buy the thing this woman had, which was the absolute certainty that she belonged in any room she entered, and the complete disinterest in proving it. She stepped away from her table. One step, then another. And the laughter, that enormous 300-person laughter, that had been bouncing off the chandeliers and the antebellum walls and settling into my ribs like shrapnel, began to thin. Not because she said anything, not because she raised her hand or cleared her throat, or made any kind of announcement. She simply began walking toward me, and rooms, I have learned, have a way of sensing when someone important is moving through them. Table by table, the laughter dimmed. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. By the time she had crossed half the distance between her table and mine, the string quartet had stopped playing. I am not entirely sure they decided to stop. I think the room simply made it impossible to continue. Nicole was still standing at the microphone. I could see her in my peripheral vision, her smile frozen in place like a photograph someone had forgotten to take down. Her mouth was still in the shape of the joke. The rest of her face was doing something entirely different. The woman reached table 22. Doris, who had been mid-sip of her forbidden champagne, set her glass down and stared. The retired teacher from Murfreesboro leaned back in her chair, as though she was witnessing something historic and wanted to give it room. The woman stopped directly in front of me. She looked down at me with an expression I did not immediately recognize because I had not seen it directed at me in a very long time. It was respect. Not the polite, automatic kind, the kind that knows something, The kind that has been waiting. Mrs. Calloway, she said. Not a question. Her voice carried across the silent room without effort, the way a voice carries when it does not need to compete with anything. I would give anything to dance with you. She paused. You changed my life, and you do not even know my name. 300 people, 300 mouths, 300 brains trying to process what they had just heard. The room did not just go quiet. It restructured. The entire architecture of the evening shifted in the space between her words and my breath. I looked at her. She looked at me, and something passed between us that I could not name then, and am still finding difficult to describe now. A kind of recognition. Not the kind where you remember a face. The kind where you recognize a truth about yourself reflected in the eyes of a stranger. The truth that what you did in the quiet, what you gave without counting, what you built without signing your name to it, did not disappear just because nobody saw it. I stood up. Because what else do you do when a woman crosses an entire room full of silent people and offers you something your own daughter just publicly declared no one wanted? You dance. The string quartet began playing again. Something slow. Something that did not need a French name to be beautiful. She took my hand. Her grip was firm, and warm, and certain. We danced. A 68-year-old retired librarian from Memphis in a twice-altered funeral dress and a woman whose name I did not yet know in a gown that probably cost more than every piece of furniture in my house combined. We danced, and 300 people watched, and nobody laughed. Not one person. Not one sound except the music and the soft creak of those old floors beneath our feet. I glanced across the room at Nicole. My daughter was still standing near the microphone, but she was no longer performing. The performance had left her face the way color leaves a sky after sunset, slowly at first, then all at once. What remained was something I had not seen on my daughter's face since she was a child. Uncertainty. The particular uncertainty of someone who has just realized that the story they have been telling about another person may not be the right story at all. Good, I thought. Sit with that, sweetheart. When the song ended, the woman held my hand for a moment longer. She reached into a small clutch purse with her other hand and produced a business card, cream-colored, minimal, just a name and a number. Monday morning, she said. My office. There is something you need to see. She squeezed my hand once, briefly, the way a person does when they are making a promise they have no intention of breaking, and she walked back across the room. People parted for her without quite realizing they were doing it. That is a particular kind of presence, the kind you cannot manufacture, and cannot buy, and cannot learn from a YouTube video no matter how many times your daughter tells you that YouTube is where people learn things now. The reception continued. Technically, the music played. The food was served. People resumed their conversations. But the atmosphere had changed entirely. The comfortable, self-congratulatory warmth had been replaced by something more electric. Something that crackled around table 22 like static before a storm. People kept glancing at me. The retired teacher from Murfreesboro shook my head slowly and said, "Well, that was something." Doris grabbed my arm and whispered, "Who was that woman?" "I do not know," I said. And I meant it. I looked at the business card. Denise Warren. Just the name. Just a number. No title. No company. The kind of card that belongs to someone who does not need to explain who they are, because the people who need to know already do. I looked across the room at Nicole, who was standing beside Tyler with an expression I had never seen on my daughter's face before. It was the expression of a woman who has just realized she may have fundamentally misread the most familiar person in her life. I did not wave. I did not go to her. I simply held my wine glass, took a slow sip, and let 68 years of being underestimated sit in the air between us like a question she was not yet ready to answer. I took the bus home to Memphis that night. 3 hours and 40 minutes in the dark. I sat by the window and watched the highway lights slide past like slow yellow stars. I held the business card in my lap and turned it over and over between my fingers the way you turn over a sentence in a book that you know is going to matter but have not yet figured out how. Butterscotch was waiting at the door when I got home. He looked at me with the particular expression of a cat who believes he has been abandoned and is prepared to be dramatic about it. I picked him up, set him on the kitchen counter where he is not allowed, but where we both pretend he does not go, and I made myself a cup of tea. And I thought, what exactly does Denise Warren want with a retired librarian from Memphis who goes to bed at 9, reads 2 books a week, and whose biggest adventure in the last year was apparently new computers at the library? I did not know yet, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. I did not sleep well that night. Butterscotch curled against my hip the way he does when he senses I am unsettled, which is often because cats know things they have no business knowing and refuse to explain themselves about it. I lay in the dark in the bedroom Arthur, and I shared for 27 years, and I turned the name over in my mind the way I had turned the card over in my fingers on the bus. Denise Warren. I did not recognize it. I had lived 68 years and met thousands of people, many of them in a library where strangers walk in every day, carrying questions they cannot quite articulate, and I could not connect that name to a single face in my memory. Sunday morning. I made my tea, fed Butterscotch, who accepted his breakfast with the dignified indifference of a creature who believes food simply appears by divine right. And then I did something I almost never do. I sat down at the small desk in the living room where Arthur's old laptop still lives, opened it, waited the full 2 minutes it takes to start because I refuse to buy a new one when this one still works, and I typed Denise Warren into the search bar. The screen filled with her face. Article after article. Forbes, Bloomberg, The New York Times, Time Magazine's 40 Under 40 from 12 years ago. Denise Warren, founder and chief executive officer of EduPath Technologies, a company I had never heard of that apparently provided educational technology platforms to underserved school districts across 37 states. Net worth, according to 3 different sources, approximately $2.1 billion. I set my tea down very slowly. $2.1 billion. The woman who had crossed a wedding reception in Nashville to dance with me, who had held my hand and told me I had changed her life, who had looked at me with the kind of recognition you cannot fake, was worth $2.1 billion. And I had absolutely no idea why she knew my name. I closed the laptop. I sat in the kitchen for a long time. Butterscotch jumped onto the counter and stared at me with the expression of a cat who is waiting for an explanation. I do not have one, I told him. He did not seem satisfied. And then, slowly, the way a book falls open to a page you have read so many times, the spine remembers it for you. Something shifted in my memory. Not a name, not a face. A feeling. The feeling of a Tuesday afternoon in a library in Memphis, 22 years ago, when a girl walked in who did not look like the other children. She was 16, maybe 15. It was hard to tell because hunger and exhaustion have a way of making young people look both older and younger at the same time. Older in the eyes, younger in the shoulders. She was wearing a jacket, 2 sizes too large, and shoes that did not match, and she smelled like the shelter on Poplar Avenue, which I recognized because I had volunteered there on weekends for 3 years before Arthur got sick. She did not ask for help. She did not approach the desk. She found the farthest corner of the reading room, the corner near the window where the afternoon light came in, warm and gold, and she sat down with a book she had pulled from the young adult shelf, without looking at the title. She held it open in her lap, but she was not reading it. She was sitting in a warm, quiet place where nobody was going to ask her to leave. I let her be. That first day, I let her be. Because I have learned in 40 years of library work that the most important thing you can do for a person who has been chased out of every other room is to not chase them out of yours. She came back the next day, and the day after that, and every day for 3 weeks before I walked over with a cup of hot chocolate I had made in the staff kitchen and set it on the table beside her without a word. She looked at me. I looked at her, and something passed between us that did not require language. Her name, she told me eventually, was D. Just D. No last name offered. No story volunteered. She was 16. She was living at the shelter. She had not been to school in 2 years. And she was the smartest person I had met in a decade, which I recognized, not because she told me, but because of the questions she asked when she finally started asking them. Questions about how things worked, how systems connected, how information moved from one place to another, and who decided what was worth keeping. I did not report her. I did not call social services. I did not do any of the things I was probably supposed to do, because I had been doing this long enough to know that sometimes the system does not save people. Sometimes a warm corner and a cup of hot chocolate and a woman who does not ask too many questions saves people. I started teaching her after the library closed. GED preparation. Mathematics first. Because that was where she was weakest and where I was strongest, which Arthur always found amusing because he said I could not balance our checkbook, but could explain algebra to a teenager in a way that made it sound like a story. He was right about both things. Then, writing. I taught her to write essays the way I taught every child who came through those doors, needing something they could not name. Start with what you know. Build toward what you feel. Do not be afraid of the sentence that scares you. That is usually the one worth keeping. I wrote her college recommendation letters. 3 of them. I wrote them at this kitchen table, at 2 in the morning, while Arthur slept in butterscotch, the first butterscotch, the orange tabby who preceded the current butterscotch by a generation, sat on my papers and refused to move. And when the application fees came due, 4 universities at $75 each, $300 total, I paid them. I took the money from the jar on the counter, labeled Roof Fund, because the roof had been leaking over the guest bedroom since November and needed patching before spring. The roof could wait. This girl could not. Dee was not the only one. I want to be clear about that. She was not the first, and she was not the last. Over 30 years in that library, I helped dozens of children. Quiet children. Hungry children. Children who came in from the cold, and the noise, and the chaos of lives that had not chosen them, and sat in my reading room and found something they could not find anywhere else. I kept a ledger, not of money. I never tracked the money. The money was not the point. I kept a small notebook, green cover, Arthur's handwriting on the first page, because he had labeled it for me the Christmas he gave it to me as a gift. Maggie's Kids, he wrote. Inside, on each page, a name, a date, and a dream. D, 16, wants to change the world. That is what I wrote the day she finally told me what she wanted. I want to change the world, Mrs. Calloway. I just do not know how yet. I never told Nicole. I never told anyone. Not because I was hiding it. Because it simply was not the kind of thing I talked about. You do not announce that you fed a hungry child. You do not hold a press conference about paying someone's application fees. You just do it. You do it because it is Tuesday, and the girl is in the corner, and the roof can wait. And then you do it again on Wednesday. Monday morning. I put on my good dress, the same one from the wedding, because it was still the nicest thing I owned, and I was not about to start pretending otherwise. I fed butterscotch, locked the door, and walked to the bus stop. For the second time in a week, Margaret Calloway was going somewhere she did not quite belong. But this time, someone was expecting her. The EduPath Technologies building stood on the north side of Nashville like something that had grown out of the ground fully formed. 20 floors of glass and steel, no sign outside. Just the address in brushed metal beside a revolving door that moved so smoothly it felt like it was apologizing for the inconvenience of existing. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up. I am 5'4". I have spent my entire adult life in a one-story library with a leaking ceiling. This building was a physical reminder that the world contains scales I have never operated on and was never invited to consider. A young man was waiting near the elevator bank inside. Tall, early 30s, suit that fit him the way suits fit people who have them made specifically for their bodies. He was smiling at me with none of the confusion I would have expected from someone watching a 68-year-old woman in a twice-altered dress walk into a building full of technology executives. Mrs. Calloway, he said. Not a question. I am Marcus. Miss Warren's executive assistant. I have heard about you my entire career here. He paused. Then he said something I was not prepared for. Welcome home. I looked at him, and for reasons I could not explain and did not try to, my eyes burned. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remind me that there are words in this world that find the exact room inside you that has been locked for years and open it without asking permission. Denise Warren's office was not what I expected. I had imagined glass and chrome and cold precision. Instead, the room was warm. Bookshelves lined one entire wall, real books, red books, books with creased spines and the particular softness that comes from being held too many times. Plants, a rug chosen for comfort, and on the desk, beside a laptop and a stack of papers, a single object that stopped me in the doorway. A book. Thin. Blue cover. Faded. The spine cracked in 3 places. I recognized it the way you recognize your own handwriting. Not by looking at it closely, but by the feeling it produces in your chest before your brain catches up. It was a copy of The Phantom Toll Booth by Norton Juster. The exact copy I had pulled from the young adult shelf 22 years ago and placed on a table beside a cup of hot chocolate without saying a word. The exact copy a 16-year-old girl in mismatched shoes had picked up and held in her lap while she was really just sitting in the first warm, quiet place that had not asked her to leave. Denise was standing behind her desk. She saw me looking at the book. She did not explain it. She did not need to. Sit down, Maggie, she said. It was the first time she had used my first name. It sounded like she had been practicing it for 22 years. She folded her hands on the desk the way Arthur used to fold his hands when he was about to say something important. And she told me, 10 years ago, she said, I started a foundation. I named it after the person who made everything else possible. She looked at me steadily. I named it after you, the Callaway Foundation. I said the words slowly, testing them in my mouth the way you test a sentence in a language you are not sure you speak. She stood and walked to a door on the far side of the office. Come with me, she said. The room behind the door was not large, maybe 15 feet by 20, but every inch of the walls was covered. Photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Young faces of every shade and shape. Some smiling, some serious, some mid-laugh, some looking directly into the camera with the particular intensity of a person who wants you to know they are here and they made it. 513, Denise said quietly. The executive was gone. The CEO was gone. What was left was something much younger and much older at the same time. 513 young people who were homeless or in foster care or aging out of the system. Full scholarships, housing, mentorship, career placement. She turned to me. Every single one of them exists because of what you did for me in that library. Because you gave me a cup of hot chocolate and a book and did not ask me a single question. Because you paid $300 you did not have, so I could apply to colleges I did not believe would accept me. Because you believed I was worth a leaking roof. I stood in front of that wall. I touched the edge of one photograph. A young woman in a graduation cap, grinning so wide her face could barely contain it. Another. A young man in a suit standing in front of what looked like a school. Another. A girl, maybe 17, holding a certificate, her eyes bright with something I recognized. Hope. The specific, defiant, stubborn hope of a person who has been told they are nothing and has decided, quietly, to disagree. I did not cry. Margaret Callaway does not cry in office buildings. But I stood very still for a very long time, and I let 513 faces look back at me, and I thought about a green notebook in a kitchen drawer in Memphis with names and dates and dreams written in pencil. And I understood, for the first time, that the ledger I had kept was not a record. It was a seed catalog, and the harvest was on this wall. Denise picked up a folder from her desk. Cream-colored. Thick. She slid it across to me. I would like you to be the founding partner of the Callaway Foundation, she said. Officially. Your name is already on it. I would like the rest of you to be on it too. I opened the folder. I will not tell you the specific figure on the first page. What I will tell you is that it had enough zeros to make a 68-year-old retired librarian sit very still and reconsider every bus ride and every leaking roof and every $300 application fee she had ever paid with money she did not have. I closed the folder. "I need to think about this," I said. "Of course," Denise said. And then she said one more thing. "There is a TED Talk next month. I have been invited to speak. The title is The Librarian Who Saved My Life." She looked at me with the same steady expression from the wedding. "I need you there, Mrs. Calloway. Front row." I looked at the folder. I looked at the wall of faces. I looked at the thin blue book on her desk, the book that had traveled from a library shelf in Memphis to the office of a woman worth $2.1 billion without ever being returned, which as a librarian I suppose I should have feelings about, but as a human being I could only find beautiful. I took the bus home to Memphis, sat in my kitchen. Butterscotch jumped onto my lap without invitation, which is his way. I held the folder, and I thought about Arthur, about what he would say if he were sitting across from me with his coffee, and his crossword and his way of making complicated things sound simple. He would have said, "Maggie, you stubborn, wonderful woman, say yes." I called Harold the next morning. Harold Myers, Arthur's accountant for 22 years, and mine for the 12 since Arthur died. A man so careful and conservative with money that he once spent 45 minutes explaining to me why I should not buy a new toaster until the old one was actually on fire. His exact words were, "Maggie, it still makes toast." The fact that it makes a concerning sound while doing so is not a financial emergency. Harold had never once in 34 years of managing first Arthur's modest finances, and then my even more modest ones said anything that could be described as emotional. He was a numbers man. He believed in spreadsheets the way other people believed in prayer, quietly, devoutly, and with complete confidence that the answers were in there if you looked hard enough. I read him the relevant pages of the folder over the phone. I read them slowly because the numbers were large and I wanted to make sure I was not misreading them, which I was not, but which I kept hoping I was because the alternative was that my life had just changed in a way I did not have a category for. Harold was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing. I could hear his pencil tapping against his desk, which is what he does when he is processing something that does not fit neatly into a spreadsheet. Then Harold Myers, 61 years old, certified public accountant, a man who had never in my presence expressed an emotion stronger than mild concern about quarterly tax estimates, said something that made me set down my tea. "Maggie." His voice cracked. Just slightly. The way a window cracks when something hits it that it was not built to withstand. "Arthur would want you to say yes." I held the phone. I did not speak, because Harold had just said my dead husband's name with the particular tenderness of a man who had also lost his friend, and had been carrying that loss in spreadsheets and tax returns for 12 years without ever once mentioning it. "I know he would," I said. "Then say yes, Maggie. For the love of everything reasonable, say yes." I called Denise that afternoon. "I will do it," I said. "One condition." "Name it." "I need to keep taking the bus," I said. She laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised and warm and full of something that sounded like relief. "The bus," she said. "Of course. Whatever you need." "Good," I said, "because I am not about to start pretending I am someone who gets driven places. I take the bus. The bus is fine. The bus has always been fine." I hung up and sat in my kitchen and looked at the folder on my table and thought about how strange life is. How you can spend 30 years doing something quietly, asking for nothing, telling no one, and then one Saturday night your daughter calls you boring in front of 300 people, and 6 days later you are a founding partner of a foundation that has changed 513 lives, and you still take the bus. Arthur would have loved this. He would have sat across from me and laughed until his coffee went cold, and then he would have looked at me with those eyes that always saw me, always, even when nobody else did, and he would have said, "Maggie, you were never boring. You were just busy." 4 days later, Nicole called. Sunday afternoon. The particular time Nicole calls when she wants something but needs it to sound like she does not want anything. Mom, hey. How are you? Fine, sweetheart. How was the honeymoon? Amazing. Tyler loved Tuscany. She paused. The pause was too long. Pauses that long are never casual. They are scaffolding for the question that is being built behind them. Mom. Random question. There are no random questions from my daughter. There are only questions she has rehearsed in the shower and decided to deliver as though they just occurred to her. You know Denise Warren, Edupath Technologies? I said, which is not a lie. It is simply a sound. Tyler's firm has been trying to get a meeting with her team for over a year. Nobody gets through. Like, nobody. But I heard through a contact that she has been taking meetings lately, and I just thought, I do not know. You do not happen to know anyone who might have a connection, like from your library network or whatever? I held the phone and I smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a bitter smile. The particular smile of a 68-year-old woman who has spent her entire life being underestimated by the person she loves most in this world, and has just been asked if her library network might include someone who knows a billionaire. Cannot think of anyone, sweetheart, I said. My voice was pleasant. My heart was full. The irony was so sweet it almost had a taste. Right, Nicole said. Yeah. Long shot. A beat of silence. Hey, you should come visit soon. I feel like I have not really seen you since the... She stopped herself. She knew since when. The wedding. The microphone. The joke. The laughter. She knew. Just soon, she said. Okay? Soon, I said. I hung up. I sat for a long time in the kitchen. Butterscotch was on the counter where he is not allowed, and where we both pretend he does not go. I reached into the drawer beside the stove, the drawer where I keep Arthur's old reading glasses, and the takeout menus for 2 restaurants that closed years ago, and a green notebook with Arthur's handwriting on the cover. Maggie's Kids. I opened it. I turned the pages slowly. Each page. A name. A date. A dream. Marcus, 14. Wants to be an engineer. Shonda, 12. Wants to write books. David, 17. Wants to build houses for people who do not have them. I stopped at a page near the middle. The handwriting was mine, but younger. The pencil lighter. The date 22 years ago. D, 16. Wants to change the world. I ran my finger over the words. I closed the notebook. I put it back in the drawer beside Arthur's glasses. 3 weeks. That is how long I had to wait. 3 weeks to sit with what I knew while my daughter tried to find a door that was already open. She just did not know who was holding it. The auditorium seated 800 people, and every seat was full. I know because I counted. Librarians count things. It is what we do when we are nervous and do not want anyone to know. I was wearing my good dress. The same one. The only one. Denise had offered to have something sent to me. I told her that a dress that had been to a funeral, a wedding, and the offices of a $2 billion company was certainly good enough for a TED Talk. She did not argue. Front row, center seat. A small card on the chair read reserved, Mrs. Calloway. I sat down and placed my purse on my lap and thought about a reading room in Memphis with afternoon light coming through dusty windows and a girl in the corner holding a book she was not reading. Nicole arrived 20 minutes later. I heard her before I saw her. That particular voice she uses in professional settings. Warmer than her real voice, slightly faster. Tyler was beside her. His firm had been trying to reach Edupath for over a year, and someone told them Denise Warren would be speaking today. They sat 6 rows behind me. Nicole did not see me. I did not turn around. The lights dimmed. Denise walked onto the stage in a simple black dress. No jewelry. No performance. She stood at the center and did not speak for a long time. The silence grew until it filled the room like water rising. When I was 16 years old, she said, I was homeless. I lived in a shelter on Poplar Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee. I had not been to school in 2 years. I owned 1 jacket that did not fit and 2 shoes that did not match, and I had been told by every system and every institution that was supposed to protect me that I was not worth protecting. The room was very still. I walked into a library, not because I wanted to read, because it was warm, because it was the only place in the city where nobody asked me to explain why I was there or how long I planned to stay. She paused. Her voice had not cracked. She was telling this story the way you tell a story you have lived inside for 22 years and have finally decided to let the rest of the world hear. There was a woman in that library, Denise said. The librarian. She did not ask me my name. She did not ask why my shoes did not match. She brought me a cup of hot chocolate and a book and set them on the table and walked away. Denise held up her hand. In it was a thin book with a blue cover, faded, spine cracked in 3 places. I recognized it from 18 feet away, the way you recognize something that has its own heartbeat. This book, Denise said. The Phantom Tollbooth. This is the actual copy. I never returned it. She allowed herself a small smile. I suspect the librarian has feelings about that. Warm laughter. The kind that knows it is witnessing something sacred and uses humor to keep from crying. That woman taught me to read for a future I did not believe I had, Denise continued. She taught me mathematics after the library closed. She wrote my college recommendation letters at 2 in the morning. She paid my application fees with money that was supposed to fix her roof, because she decided my future was more important than her ceiling. She did this for 30 years, not just for me. For dozens of children who walked through those doors carrying nothing but the hope that someone might see something worth believing in. She kept a green notebook. In it, she wrote their names and their dreams. Never the money. The dreams. She never told anyone. Not her daughter. Not a single person in 30 years. She just showed up. Every single day. And she believed in a girl the world had already given up on. Denise looked down from the stage, directly at me. Mrs. Margaret Calloway, she said. The reason I am standing here. 800 people stood. Not slowly. Not politely. The way a room stands when it has just understood something that cannot be understood sitting down. The applause hit me like weather. Like something elemental that has no interest in whether you are ready for it. I did not stand. I stayed in my seat and placed my hands in my lap and did what I have always done. I stayed quiet and let the moment be what it was. 6 rows behind me, I heard a sound, small, almost nothing. The sound a person makes when they suddenly understand something they should have understood a long time ago. I did not turn around. I did not need to. I knew that sound. I had been listening for it for 35 years. After the talk, people moved toward Denise. Tyler moved toward Denise. Nicole did not move at all. She was standing exactly where she had been when Denise said my name, as if her feet had decided independently that they were not going anywhere until the rest of her caught up. I walked to her, not the other way around, because some distances a mother crosses, no matter what. Her face was doing something I had not seen since she was 7 years old and had broken the ceramic vase. Arthur brought home from Charleston and stood in the kitchen holding the pieces with the absolute certainty that she had destroyed. Something that could not be fixed. Mom, she said. Her voice came out at about half the volume she intended. I did not. I had no idea. I know you did not, baby. Her jaw worked. Her eyes were full. My daughter, who could perform anything for anyone at any time, was not performing now. I never kept score, baby, I said. I never needed the world to see my ledger, but I need you to know. Your mother was never boring. She was just busy doing things that mattered, very quietly. 1 tear fell. Then another. She opened her mouth, and nothing came out, which was fine. Some of the most important conversations between mothers and daughters happen in the silence between words that are not ready yet. I put my hand on her shoulder. Briefly. Firmly. The way mothers do when they love someone and are also hurt by them, and do not have words for both at once. Not as punishment, I said. As information. I picked up my purse. I straightened my dress. The same dress. The only dress. and I walked out of that auditorium without looking back. The Tennessee afternoon received me the way Tennessee always does, gently, with warmth that does not ask where you have been, and does not need to know where you are going. The air outside the auditorium was soft, the kind of October air that sits on your skin like a hand placed there by someone who loves you and is not in a hurry to take it away. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and let it settle over me. The noise from inside, the applause that was still going, the voices beginning to rise as 800 people shifted from witness to conversation, faded behind the closing door. And then it was just me, Margaret Calloway, 68 years old, standing on a sidewalk in a dress that had seen more of life than most wardrobes see in a lifetime, holding a purse that contained a founding partnership document and a bus ticket home. I walked to the station. I did not call a car. I did not look for a taxi. I walked the way I have always walked through the world, at my own pace, in my own direction, answering to no one, and requiring nothing, except the ground beneath my feet, and the certainty that where I was going was where I needed to be. The bus was half empty. I took my usual seat by the window, the same seat I had taken a week ago, coming home from the wedding, the same seat I had taken 2 days ago, coming home from Edupath. The vinyl was cracked, and the air conditioning made a sound like a cat purring underwater. But it was my seat, and I have never needed things to be perfect. I have only ever needed them to be mine. Memphis appeared gradually through the window, the way it always does when you approach it from the west. First the skyline, modest and familiar. Then the neighborhoods, the ones tourists do not visit, the ones where people live real lives in real houses, with real problems and real grace. Then my street, my stop. My walk home past the church where Arthur and I were married 39 years ago, under a sky so blue it looked like God had painted it that morning just for us. I believe God paints a lot of things we do not notice. Sunsets we are too busy to watch. Kindnesses we are too proud to accept. Children sitting in library corners who are too afraid to ask for help. I believe He puts them there and waits, with the particular patience that only God and librarians seem to possess, for someone to notice. And I believe that sometimes, maybe most of the time, He does not send miracles. He sends people. Ordinary, tired, underpaid people in twice-altered dresses who take the bus and keep green notebooks and never once think to call what they are doing extraordinary because they are too busy doing it. Butterscotch was at the door. He looked at me with an expression that communicated, clearly and without ambiguity, that my absence had been noted, evaluated, and found unacceptable. I picked him up. He allowed it, which is his version of forgiveness. I carried him to the kitchen and set him on the counter where he is not allowed, and where we both stopped pretending about years ago. I made my tea. The kettle Arthur bought me for our 20th anniversary, the one with the small dent on the side from the time I dropped it during a thunderstorm. And he picked it up and said, "Still works, Maggie, like everything else in this house." I poured the water. I sat down. The kitchen was quiet, the kind of quiet I have lived inside for 12 years, the kind of quiet that used to feel like absence and now feels like company. Arthur is in this quiet. In the chair he sat in the crossword, books still stacked beside the toaster, in the reading glasses in the drawer next to a green notebook labeled in his handwriting, Maggie's Kids. I opened the drawer. I took out the notebook. I did not open it. I just held it, felt the weight of it in my hands. Not heavy. A notebook full of names and dreams written in pencil does not weigh much, but it is the heaviest thing I own. Nicole would rebuild. I know my daughter. She is stubborn and talented, and underneath the performance, underneath the microphone and the toast and the joke and the laughter, she is the girl I raised. The girl I drove to school when the car barely started. The girl I read to every night until she told me she was too old for stories, which broke my heart in the small, ordinary way that motherhood breaks your heart 100 times before breakfast. She would sit with what happened in that auditorium. She would turn it over the way I turn over words, in books that I know are going to matter. She would eventually, not soon, but eventually, understand it the way it needed to be understood. Not as punishment, as the simple, painful, necessary truth that the woman she called boring had been quietly building something enormous, with nothing but patience and a cup of hot chocolate and the stubborn belief that every child who walks through a door deserves someone on the other side who is paying attention. And when she was ready, I would be here, in Memphis, where I have always been, where God put me, I think, for reasons I did not understand at 25 and am only beginning to understand at 68. He put me in a library. He put children in my path. He put a green notebook in my hands, and he trusted me to do the rest without needing to be seen. I sipped my tea. Butterscotch settled into my lap, warm and heavy, and completely certain that this was where he belonged. I picked up my book from the side table, opened it to the page I had dog-eared 3 days ago, began to read. And for the first time since a Saturday night in Nashville, when my own daughter held a microphone and told 300 people that nobody wanted to dance with her boring old mom, Margaret Calloway felt exactly, completely, and without apology like herself. Not boring. She was never boring. She was just quiet. And the thing about quiet women, the thing Nicole Prescott was only now beginning to understand, 6 rows back in an auditorium with Denise Warren's voice still in the air and 513 faces on a wall she had never seen, is that quiet is not the same as invisible. Quiet women see everything. Quiet women remember everything. Quiet women keep notebooks full of names and dreams. And quiet women, when the moment finally arrives, when they straighten their dress and pick up their purse and walk out of a room they have just rearranged completely, quiet women do not look back. They do not need to. They never did. If this story reached something inside you, if it reminded you of a mother or a grandmother or a woman in your life who has been quietly holding the world together without asking for applause, share it with them. Tell them you see them. Drop a comment below and let us know whose quiet strength has shaped your life. Subscribe so you do not miss the stories that matter. And as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being the kind of person who stays until the end.